Welcome to episode 139 of The Lifestyle Chase, and I've brought back Nick Sorrell and Austin Current for a bit of a roundtable conversation. So let's start off with Austin. How are you doing today? What's something crazy that's happened in the last couple hours?
Doing well. Last couple of hours,
Yeah.
absolutely nothing. So just working, drinking too much coffee. The typical morning as far as things go here in Kentucky. So yeah, nothing too special the last couple of hours.
How about you, Nick?
Uh, kind of the same. I did a bunch of emails like right before we got on the phone, so I was like racing the clock. So that was kind of hype in the most boring way possible. That's really about it. And then my roommate, I was trying to tell him like, "Hey, dude, I'm on a podcast. Don't don't be loud."
Welcome to The Lifestyle Chase, Season 2. This podcast features high performers who have found a way to live their best life while balancing their health, wellness, friends, and family. I'm your host, Chris Little. Let's get started. The Lifestyle Chase is brought to you by Yeg Fitness. Yeg Fitness is Edmonton, Alberta, Canada's healthy lifestyle community, creating and supporting active living for all. Check them out online at yegfitness.ca and on social media at yegfitness.
So that's about it.
That's awesome. So to give the audience some backstory, both of these guys have been on the Lifestyle Chase before, so you get a little bit of context to who they are, what they're about, what their origin story is, and just some cool things to teach you more about them. But we recorded those before COVID-19, before everything happened. Expectation versus reality. Let's start with you, Nick. Like, what was your expectation for the last period of time, and what's been your reality, and what are your reflections from that?
During like the period of COVID and all this stuff.
Yeah, or even just
Yeah.
like this year, just as a summary kind of thing so far.
So okay, so one takeaway I had from like COVID specifically is like, so like when shit hit and a lot of people were like really heavily affected, and then people that weren't quite affected weren't sure if they were going to be. There's like a lot of confusion and stuff like that. I remember during a lot of exchanges with people, because I wasn't affected like financially or with my job or anything like that, and I would assume you guys are. Well, you do a lot of in-person training, so maybe you were, but I felt a lot of guilt initially because people would send me emails and they'd be telling me about their week and how shitty things were. And they're like, "How are you?" And I felt bad saying like, "I'm fine." I was also seeing my girlfriend at the time, and she had a home gym, so I still got to work out and all this other stuff. So it was weird because I felt almost guilty that I wasn't affected, or so I thought. But as time went on, I started to get like super like irritable and just like worn down and things like that. And I started to realize like that we were all affected by this, just because of like it changed the tone of so many people that it's hard not to. It almost like takes on like a viral, no pun intended, like effect. And I think like that has been the tone, at least that I've realized this year, that I struggled with, was like not being contagious to everything going on, whether it be like COVID and how hard that has hit people, and also like politics and all the craziness going on with that, and the social or the civil rights stuff. So I think like this year has been real weird in terms of like there's so many things that affect us that we don't even realize are affecting us. You know what I'm saying? Especially political shit. You just get drawn into it. And it fucks up your head and stuff. Um, so I think that's been one thing that kind of caught me off guard that I thought I was aware of, but I wasn't. You know?
Yeah, definitely. Like when you say like thought you're aware of and then you weren't, like I can totally relate because we'll seem like we're fine, or we're like, oh yeah, did a lot of big projects this year or made a lot of big accomplishments, and then you realize like subliminally how much the energy of people can impact, or the changes in dynamics of how we communicate or things like that. I mean, for me, just the lack of high fives, like no high fives, no handshakes, a lot of like different social interactions are lacking. So, Austin, what are your thoughts? Like, what's happened for you? What's life been like?
Yeah, it's pretty much building upon what Nick went over. A lot's been the same as far as work goes. My professional life, I'm grateful that I'm mainly online or solely online, and I had a couple projects kind of come up this year that take a lot of time, but are a blessing in that regard, where uh, I get to contribute positively to the greater good of an industry. I feel with this one particular project I'm talking about, and that's been a cool thing. Just kind of wrap my head around. I was sort of taken off course as far as momentum went with coaching and clients and stuff like that. I think as we all are to some extent. And that was interesting to kind of get through, but I was grateful that, whether financially things are, obviously probably not going to be the same at the end of the year, the amount of meaningful good work I can produce is going to be similar and or probably greater, because I've been able to take some steps back from just working one-on-one with clients and been able to pour more time into content creation and working on some really cool projects. So that's been a cool part of it. To kind of build upon what Nick said, is from like a social aspect. I think I wouldn't say I'm the most social person to begin with. I would say I'm social in regards to like intimate settings, but I've never been the one to go out and be seen, and that's just not really in my personality, and it never really has been. But one thing that's been really interesting to kind of build upon kind of what Nick was saying was the way we're socially interacting is much different, and the hostility from people. I mean, just being in a grocery store, for example, being in Kentucky, being in the middle of the United States, majority, I won't make this too political, but the majority sort of red underpinnings and backbone of the way that people think around these parts of the world. There are, every time I go to the store, I would say at least 10%, if not more at this point, still are not cooperating with just wearing masks and socially distancing properly. And I was actually in the store, Nick will appreciate Kroger. I was in a Kroger, and so a person, I guess, so I was in the store when it's happened, but I wasn't in the aisle. But I heard about it obviously through the echo of, man, what just happened. So, and ironically, the guy who told me and kind of joked about it wasn't wearing a mask. So that was fun. But apparently someone approached someone in an aisle that wasn't wearing a mask, and they weren't respecting their distance. And so the person that apparently was sort of in an uproar about this situation started to throw pickle bottles and all bunch of glass and basically just trash the aisle, which, an outbreak, obviously there's underpinnings to why they're reacting this way, right? It had nothing probably to do with the fact that in like this particular situation, right? It's probably an uproar of like pent up expression that they're just taking out on this individual, sort of like road rage. But it was the aisle 10 rage. And that's been an interesting thing. Just the social interaction has been so different. And I would say another thing that I've noticed, obviously the only place I'm really going publicly right now is the grocery store. So that's where most of my interactions are. So that's where most of my examples come from. But basically, my stature, I come off as sort of like, my stature, I can come off as sort of, I don't want to say abrasive, but just sort of like blunt. Like I sort of have I would say a resting bitch face as far as things go, but like now that, but I'm typically one to meet you with like, hey, if you got in my way, I'm typically the first person to smile and just be like, hey man, no worries, it's fine. Like we're totally cool in this scenario. And I'd say I have a very light way about me in the way that I sort of put myself out into the world. But if you just saw me standing there, I would probably look rather intimidating to a person that I would look very sort of off-putting as far as like he's unapproachable, if I'm making sense there. But if you approach me, like again, I'm the first one to smile and be very lighthearted and open about that interchange. And you could probably run over my foot and break my toe, and I'll still probably smile and say I'm sorry for doing that, or getting in your way or something. It's that. I don't know what it is, but that's just the way I am. But that's been sort of stripped away because I'm wearing a mask and all you can see is my eyes. And obviously I'm getting to the point here, but that's been the biggest weird thing for me is I have this stature, I have this sort of demeanor, the way I sort of walk, and I can like I carry myself in a certain way, sort of naturally. That's usually balanced out by you being able to see my face and see that I'm happy and smiling and lighthearted and like not serious. But that's sort of been stripped away. And so that empathic sort of undertone has been stripped away, which has been super weird because, I'll notice more and more that people are, if they get in my way or, since everyone's super like, we're not moving the same either, mm-hmm. right? Through the aisles and through the store, because we're trying to like keep our distance, and we're making some weird, like really different calculated decisions socially. And so like I've run into more people with a cart, or they've run into me more than I have in my whole life over the past 8 months. And, the interchanges and reactions you get from people now are just so much different.
Yeah.
And, people are very quick to just be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like I'm going to attack them, mm-hmm. but because they can't see my face, they just see my eyes. And it's just like this piercing, I have these piercing sort of blue eyes, like these, facing front predator eyes. And it's just like, I'm smiling under the mask, but you can't see it. And then I got this big beard under, that's sort of coming out of my mask. And it's just, it's super funny, man. And, so professionally pretty much the same, but socially it definitely some weird things to get used to. And sort of the empathic nature to humans, I think, is being sort of stripped back, to a certain extent.
Well, I mean, I totally relate to a lot of that, like the whole grocery store experience. I mean, that's where I'm getting a lot of my social interactions, and I'm finding that I have to smize more, like smile with my eyes, because otherwise I don't know. And so it's like being aware of like, okay, what looks like resting bitch face and what looks like happy kind of thing, and just the actions that we can take day to day. Just I saw a post on social media a while back, and it was like there are still ways to hold the door open for people while still being like physically distant. Like there's still things that we can do. We can still be courteous when we're finding our parking spot, or be careful when, like, because more people are walking outside, we can kind of be careful when we're commuting to wherever we have to commute to and not like run over people in a crosswalk kind of thing. But I've found that we don't become aware of all of these little tiny things until the point where we get kind of knocked on our butt. And at the start of the podcast, I asked you both like the weirdest question of like, what's happened to you in the last 2 hours? And I'll give you some context as to why that kind of popped into my head, because I was doing some very deep thinking this morning. When I first woke up, I was out of coffee. And so I had to go and pick up some coffee. Like typically I will make like my own ground coffee, use a French press. But today I was out of that and I was like, well, if I'm going to have this very deep conversation on a podcast, I'm going to need my caffeine. And so I go to my car and the tire's low, so I filled it up. My car was parked like 2 blocks away from my condo because they're doing construction in the area. And I'm filling up the car and cars are going like flying past me, like 20 kilometers per hour over the speed limit. And then I get to the coffee place and they hand me the cup and they're like, okay, have a good day. And I was like, oh man, like it's dripping on me. And I set it in the cup holder and the coffee cup had a hole in it. And then I get parked at my place and again there was very little parking, so I had to park far away. And I went through all of this and I was like, like every time that something's inconvenient, it's not necessarily like holding me back. It's helping me realize like missing context. It's making me better at communications, helping me realize like if I want something, I've got to ask for it. Like if I want to have like a better experience in the morning, I have to set myself up for it. Like whether that be planning for a more advantageous parking spot, like assessing the situation for what it is and understanding what time do I have to park on the street to get a parking spot that's closer, or making the most of it, looking at the environment. Like for me, it made me appreciate my neighborhood a lot more because I was like walking down the sidewalk with the sunrise and like I never even like looked at it that way. And then even for the coffee, just like understanding that, yeah, there was like a hole in the cup and I could have just like gone back and asked for a new coffee, or I could just be like, you know what, like whatever. Like what actually happened is I had another coffee cup in my car and I was able to kind of like salvage it a little bit, like once I realized it was leaking. But it's just like usually whenever like something bad happens, I find that it teaches us a lot about what's missing. Like we already have everything that we need to take that next step or to make progress, and it's just about having that rude awakening to realize that like it takes some work and we know what we need to do to put in the work. So it's like just like following a workout program. Like if you follow it to a T, you get a positive outcome. If you cherry pick your favorite items, or you aren't pushing yourself to the rate of perceived exertion that is kind of expected, or your lifestyle habits aren't congruent with progress. Like I like when I see someone program something just brutal on a Monday, because it influences people to usually drink less on the weekend, because it's like really tough to do that Monday workout. I think I saw it might have been Dr. Pat Davidson that posted something like that, and just like I was like, that is so smart, because like if somebody wants gains more than they want like that feeling of relief or that buzz or that party or that gathering, if they want gains more, they will subconsciously make the choice to practice more moderation. And so by setting up obstacles like that make us make the better choices, is kind of it helps us to make better choices for ourselves in an independent way. And I've gone off on a bit of a tangent here, but Nick was talking about some of his introspection that he's experienced with feeling like you're talking about how you felt like you were taking up space kind of thing. And that really got me thinking. So I'd like to hear you expand a bit more on that, and like how perhaps it's given you an opportunity to reflect on how you will look at things going forward, sort of thing.
Yeah. So first, I think what you said about, an obstacle, like providing the chance for reflection. I think and I hadn't really thought of it till you said that. I think a lot of times we see something bad, and then there's like an effect, and we think that they're like direct, like one for one, like one leads to the other. Like for example, like COVID, for example, wasn't necessarily what to just use as an example that everybody's familiar with, not to make it like political, but COVID is not the reason that our economy took a big hit, like necessarily. A lot of it's because like we weren't prepared for it. Like we didn't know how to handle it. A lot of people, a lot of places that people worked at like didn't know how to work remotely and things like that. And then sure enough, people found workarounds and ways to make it, happen and stuff like that. So I think a lot of times like we confuse the manifestation of the problem for the problem, and really there's a problem in between that's actually the issue. And I thought that was interesting. But yeah, so I recently bought a house, moved into a new house, and I had to stay with my parents during like the gap between. And I started to realize, like, while it was cool, it was fine, I didn't have a lot of space to work necessarily. And I started to realize, like, I constantly felt like I was in the way. You know what I'm saying? And that was one of the reasons I was ready to get out of there. I was like, I just want to have my own space to work and things like that. And I started to realize also that like there was no reason for me to feel like I'm in the way, because I was like tucked away in the basement and stuff like that, and I started to realize that there's been many times in my life, for some reason, I don't know why, that when I'm in someone else's place, I just feel like I'm in the way. And so I brought it up earlier. Like I still actually don't know what really the reason is, but I don't know why I impose it on myself, because at the same time, I totally fucking realize that I'm not in the way. You know what I'm saying? So it's weird how we can, I don't know, do that to ourselves. Like put these weird, I don't know, stipulations
projections
or whatever on us. Yeah, it's super strange. But yeah, that's what I was talking about before we got going.
Well, I think it's important that we like point that out, because like we're gonna have things in our wheelhouse. Like the three of us have some aspect of our fitness or nutrition dialed in, where we strive for that. It's very effortless. But then within every human that we interact with, there's going to be like a point where it's like there's a struggle. And I mean, while there's also merit and value to working on the things that we're good at to improve those and to kind of like ride that positive wave, it's also like extremely advantageous to work on the things that we really suck at. Like if we can, because I know I can really relate to that whole feeling of taking up space, like even if it's just like my workouts in a gym, just like I'm more likely to compromise and completely change where I'm working out in the gym if I feel that I'm taking up the space of somebody else, even if they just strolled right on in there and like set up right in my space kind of thing. I'm always kind of like pivoting and adapting. And I mean, from like a business standpoint, it's probably the better way to be like a friendly, approachable like trainer. But then from an individual standpoint, like if it was a matter of like survival, like I should look out for myself as well.
It's like a double-edged sword or whatever, like, or blade, whatever the fuck the expression is. Like on one hand you want to be courteous, but on the other hand, like I think, at least for me, like I worry, and it's not even all the time, it's super weird. And I think about like in the gym, I do that too. Like sometimes I feel like I'm in the way, or I'll kind of like adjust like the way my gym is set up, there's like kind of like a warm-up type area, which is like boxes and bands and turf and all that shit, but it's tucked in behind a wall. So a lot of times that's where like women that are getting into fitness, for example, like kind of, because it's kind of like an archetype, like kind of go, because it's a little bit more private, so they feel a little more comfortable. So while that's like the easiest place to warm up, a lot of times if I realize it's someone that clearly isn't super comfortable, at least my perception, like I won't even go over there just to give them their privacy. On some level, I shouldn't care. Like I should just fucking do my thing and stuff, like, because I'm not bothering them. But at the same time, like, I don't know, it's this catch-22. And it's strange because I'm also not the type of dude to like not start shit with people. You know what I'm saying? Like it's super weird that like over courteous sometimes, and like other times like it doesn't matter. And I don't know if that's me gauging like what matters and what doesn't matter. It's super strange. I've never actually thought about this till this call. So
That's awesome.
I want to add something to what you're both saying here. I think, and I'm a similar way, which I can there's a lot of relatedness to myself in this situation alongside you both. So even at the peak of what I would call like my competing career, I look like a different human as far as, my stature was completely different. Obviously I still have some muscle tissue on me, but in terms of me like walking into a space, I was much more that person that walked in that was like, holy shit, like who the hell is that? Like, did he just get off stage sort of thing? And that was my walking around sort of look. And so when you walk into a gym and you look like that, you demand a sort of, it's not that I was demanding the respect, but you sort of demand that subconsciously to others, where they're sort of being the courteous ones of, it's sort of, you take a person that just got into the gym and someone like myself walking into the gym, it's the other person typically that's gonna be like, oh my, was this your bench, man? I'm so sorry. Like, and you're not even looking at the bench, you're not even near the bench, but they're just so worried and trying to be so considerate to not taking your space, right? And I'm similar to that in that I'm almost beating that other person to it, where I don't care who you are. Like, you could be the mom who's just started to train and still just looks very confused about your place in the gym at the moment. I'm still going to be the one that's like, hey, I'm sorry, are you using anything near here? Like, do you mind if I'm here? And they're just like, they look at me and they're like, I don't give a shit. Like, why are you asking me? I don't even know where I am. Sort of thing. And to me, in that moment, Chris, when you were talking about, you're in a space, you're holding a space and sort of like you're getting into your workout and someone sort of comes in to your space and now you have to pivot, right? And I think this is a crossroads of perceptions on both ends and a lack of communication between people. And one thing that I found really helps is one, going back to the expectation of perception on both sides. So, I'm always going to give the benefit of the doubt. It's sort of like my default that I live by. The benefit of the doubt that I'm going to always give you is I'm not expecting you to be malicious with your action. Obviously, some people act out of malicious intent. Sometimes it's very obvious, sometimes it's not, depending on how sort of psychopathic or sociopathic they are. It's easier to tell sometimes more than others. But as a whole, like you can typically, I would say the majority of the time, assume someone's not being malicious. Like maybe they're just completely ignorant to the fact that you were there. Maybe they just don't understand gym courtesy. Maybe they're fairly new or they've never been taught what's respectful at a gym, or what's respectful to how to conduct yourself within a gym setting. Maybe maybe the only way that someone else has acted towards them is they've been inconsiderate to them. And so out of a fuck you flame, they now treat everyone else like that because either they're bitter or they just think that's how it works. And so I think the biggest thing is, one, having the perception that, sort of giving the benefit of the doubt to someone, saying, hey, I bet they really didn't mean what they're doing here. Like, I don't think they meant to swoop in and, steal the machine that sensibly no one else is on. And there's another one just like it over there they could just go to, I don't understand. And so instead of getting royally pissed and either ruining your workout or theirs or everyone's around you, right, depending on how this situation goes, I think this really sort of gives you an opportunity to really practice human decency and communication. And so it's giving them the opportunity to sort of explain themselves without you asking, like, hey, what the fuck? Because, hey, man, hey, what were you doing on this? Or, hey, did you need this? And, give them the chance to say, like, oh, hey, were you on this? I'm so sorry. Give them the opportunity to do that. Don't just expect that they swooped in with you, knowing that you were there. And And then if you can get the vibe that they understood you were there, but they don't quite connect the dots that this is obstructive to your day or to your session, start to maybe just act as that bigger person, act as the leader, lead by example in this situation. And again, go back to assuming that they've never been given this decency or courtesy in the past by someone else. And so teach them a new way to act, teach them a new way to be in the world, and, sort of pay this wisdom forward if you can, to say like, hey man, this is the way you treat people, without having to say that, but like lead by example and give them an example to then go forward and live by, to, hey, maybe we can work in, or hey, maybe instead of, if we can't work in together, hey man, there's a machine right over there. I've already set this one up for me. Would you mind to go over there? And if not, I can go over there, but it would be nice if you did, And so
it's interesting yesterday, actually, at the gym, that the girl that I just used as an example that was uncomfortable in the warm-up area, I was finishing my workouts and I had like TRX hamstring curls, which are over there. And she had walked away for a second and I had one set left of them. And then she came back, she started setting up like kettlebells and shit, like right on top of it. And in my head, because she came across like really uncomfortable for just perception, I realized I only had one set left, and I didn't want to at first I thought about just walking back over and just doing it, but I didn't want to make her uncomfortable, so I was like, oh fuck it, like I'll just let her have the spot. Like in reality, I should have said like oh hey, I have one set. Do you mind if I just jump in real quick and finish this up? Like that's that. I don't know why I didn't do that. I guess because I was so worried about making her uncomfortable, which I guess is in line with like feeling like I'm taking up space that I'm not, like that I overcompensated. When in reality, she clearly had no idea. You know what I'm saying? Like what she did, which is cool. Like I didn't mind that. I was just so worried making her uncomfortable. I should have communicated. So it's interesting that you say, 'cause that happened to me like 20 hours ago,
Yeah. And I think it happens to all of us really often. And, depending on if you're able to go to it, luckily I'm able to go to a gym. Mm-hmm. It's a private facility, so there's not too many people there. And again, I'm very fortunate in that regard, but it still happens to me. I mean, I'm there with there's a lot of older gentlemen that go, and they're kind of oblivious to what exercise structure is, because they just do these circuits where they just do one set of everything that they can see in front of them. And that's sort of how they train, and like respect, man. But like,
for sure. Yeah.
To the same degree, I'm having to almost, it's uncomfortable to me to try to explain a simplistic concept to my elder, right? To explain something that's so simple to us, to someone that just doesn't get it. Mm-hmm. And you're having to also play against the perception of you, right? So what I'm saying in that regard is, not only if it's a gender difference, they're already sort of on guard to begin with, because they're probably uncomfortable to some degree, whether that's a little uncomfortable or a lot uncomfortable, and especially if they're new, right? So they're probably already uncomfortable. So it's not like you're going to make them uncomfortable and they weren't. They probably already are. So it's the fact of trying to, again, almost work against stereotypes if you can, right? And a lot of times we're having to work against stereotypes, almost go out of our way to express ourselves in a way where it's like, hey, I'm in no way a threat to you. I'm actually really considerate and respectful, and I'd really like to earn your trust in this situation and pay this forward. And maybe this makes you less uncomfortable, or maybe this gives you a different perception of quote unquote meatheads.
They're uncomfortable, but it's almost because of the way that stuff just went down anyway. Whereas talking and communicating, more than likely with that one, for example, there probably was some degree of uncomfortable just to be in the gym, period. But also probably working out next to a dude and stuff like that. I'm sure that there is some level of that, like probably. But communicating and being a person to her probably would have made her instantly feel so much more comfortable.
Yeah,
and
instantly.
It's so strange how counterintuitive it is. But at the same time, when you sit down and think about it, you're like, oh, duh,
I think acknowledging it to begin with. So one of the things that's really helped me in that regard is, if I'm in a situation like that, again, speaking back to my current situation, if I go to a private gym here in where I live, and if there's a lot of times where I'm the only one there, and let's say it's in the evening, right? And then a woman walks into the gym and we're the only two in that facility. I'm very aware, I'm hyper aware of how uncomfortable she may be and how threatened she may feel in that regard. And it may not be that way. She may feel fine. And I hope that's the case. But, you know, if history tells us anything, and just the social awareness aspect of living, like, she's probably in some way uncomfortable. And so the best thing that I can do is the first meeting, the first time we make acknowledgement of both of our presence in this one space, is for me to take my headphones off, acknowledge their presence. We acknowledge each other as people. And I, in some way, sort of acknowledge the fact that, you know, hey, I'm in this area today. If there's anything that it may look like I'm on it, but maybe I'm not. So just let me know if you need to work in, or if there's anything that I can share in this space with you. Please don't hesitate to ask or request it, because I'm open to sharing. And so just acknowledging that up front is probably the best thing you can do in any situation, even if you're not the only two in the gym, even if you're just in the same area as someone, acknowledging their presence and just acting as a good human. It's not like you're, you know, virtue signaling, or, you know, you're not trying to act out of character. You're just trying to be a good person, and you're trying to be considerate, right? Because I used to have these I kind of changed my social approach recently, but I used to have these observations of the week posts where, in one of those observations posts, I went over, just because you have more muscle or more training experience does not give you the right over machines over another person who may have less, right? And so you don't own this equipment. You know, this isn't a person walking off the street into your private home gym. This is you paying the same monthly member dues as someone else coming to a space that is owned and operated by someone else other than you, right? It's not your space. You share this space. Whether this is day one for someone or this is year 7 for you, it doesn't matter. You guys are under the same social contract, that they have the same right to that piece of equipment than you. I don't care if you're preparing for the Olympia. And if you are preparing for the Olympia, then you need to express, and because I used to go to Armbrust in Denver, which is like, you know, it's sort of that Northwest Coast Mecca. It's the Mile High Mecca is what they call it, right? And it's filled with Olympia caliber, high level bodybuilder caliber, bikini competitor, figure competitors. Like, if you're a competitor in that general area, people travel hours to go there multiple times a week if they live hours away. Like, it's a place where people just go and flock to if they're bodybuilders. But there's a lot of just normal people that train there and that are oblivious to what bodybuilding probably is. And so I was observing all of these things at that gym, and I would see, you know, some of these bodybuilders were very considerate and some of them were pretty disrespectful, and they would really be inconsiderate to these people who were just trying to get in there and get a good workout in before they had to go to work, or, you know, after work or whatever it was. And in my head, like, you know, I don't know, you know, being a bodybuilder in some capacity myself, and to a particularly high level, I mean, being an IFBB professional, like, I mean, be it physique, but like, it's still a caliber of like above the norm of strength trainees out there. I there's no part of me, and again, this isn't saying that I'm better than anyone else. It's just, whether it was, I guess my parents did a good job at instilling considerable qualities in me, but be considerate to other people. You know, maybe I'm Canadian in a past life, Chris, I don't know, but you need to be considerate to others, and you need to give them the respect they deserve. And if someone's blatantly disrespectful, then, you know, obviously that's open for communication. But I think what I'm getting to here is just, you don't have the right more so than anyone else. And if you can sort of tear down the walls of stereotypes and tear down the walls of an uncomfortable situation by just addressing it head on, as soon as you acknowledge the other person's presence in your space, a lot of this stuff is really taken care of. And you probably just change the trajectory of their fitness journey more than you would ever know.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump in real quick because like you guys have been dropping some good bombs today, and it's got me thinking. Got me thinking about like how people tend to reflect on themselves, and like maybe this is just my take on it, but perhaps it's something that you guys can relate to. It's just like even in the example where like every so often I'll see in like a trainer's Instagram story that they're like, I'm gonna lift this amount, and do you think I'll do it or not? And it kind of depends on like that person's persona. Like sometimes it's just like everybody knows that person's gonna lift it, and they're just trolling them, saying that you're not gonna be able to. But in most cases, like as far as capabilities go, like if somebody puts forth that they think they might be capable of something, but they want to know if everybody else thinks that they are or not, more likely than not, like their people around them think that they are. Like if we had a resume, the people in our midst are more likely to beef up our resume than we are. Like the people that we think are our critics are most often seeing us in a positive light, more so than we are ourselves. Like that's an observation that I've made lately just in my conversations with people. Like I mean, having to like metaphorically pump people's tires, like be like, okay, you might not feel like you're ready, but from my observations of your character and your qualifications and like what you bring to the table, like you're totally ready for like that job or that challenge, etc. And I think as we discover like the value of communication and context, we're also discovering like the value of understanding like how good are we, like not to be like full of ourselves, but to kind of give ourselves credit where credit is due. Like because it's kind of, I've seen a lot of Canadian friends in the industry where they are just feeling completely like worn out, because the tendency in this industry is to be everything for other people, like whether that be in person or online. Like we tend to really go and beyond, above and beyond for other people, and we don't always put ourselves first. And a lot of people find that, and it turns into burnout, and it could be like the end of their career, or it could be where they start to just like project differently to the people that are in their life. I guess I'll just kind of open the table. Like, have you guys experienced any of that in the last like year or two, where you have felt that you've just dumped your bucket out and realized it through some kind of a revelation where like you're like, I'm giving too much, I'm not taking enough for myself? Like what are your guys' experiences with that?
You can go, Austin.
Okay. So I think we're all like this in a certain, or to a certain extent. And I think there's probably a level of, there's a place or a threshold on the continuum of narcissism that we all exist upon, where you probably recognize this for yourself or you don't. What I mean by that is basically we're all narcissists to some degree. That's kind of the foundational principle of, one of foundational principles of psychology. We all have a care for ourselves to a certain degree, and if we don't, we're probably not going to survive very well in this world. Now, there's a continuum that's very, very broad, right? And there's a threshold at which we would openly probably label someone as like a narcissist. And I would say we have probably all have people in mind. Some are leaders of rather large nations, where we would label them very high on that continuum of the highest degree of narcissist there is, to the lowest of the low of this person who is sort of has basically never had a drop in their bucket, because their bucket is chronically turned over and tipping out, as water isn't allowed to collect at all in their bucket, if that makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. They're almost the windmill of water hits it and constantly is just churning off of it, right? Instead of a bucket itself. And the narcissist is at the bottom collecting all the water, is kind of how I view that. And so I think to some degree, we all kind of coexist, right, in this continuum. And there's a certain threshold at which I don't think you'll recognize it. And again, that's the higher end of the spectrum. But I don't think most of us exist in that. So I think most of us exist obviously below that threshold. And our ability to be introspective. And I think this is a real consideration to mindfulness practice to some degree, and the ability to be mindful of and be able to self-reflect and be introspective of whether it's your actions or your perceptions of the world, or kind of that period between stimulus and effects occurring, right? So one really big control of mindfulness and the ability to practice it, or one of the biggest advantages of mindfulness, is being able to have a sense of how long can that pause be between stimulus, the thing that happens, and our reaction to that thing. The longer that pause can be, the more mindful you typically are. The longer that pause can be, the better decision, more rationality you can sort of put forth, the more logic you can probably use, to where you're using rationality over emotion, for example. So I think the ability to be mindful gives us a lot of tools, and our ability to have a longer gap period in terms of being able to self-reflect in between some things or something that's happened, and in this scenario, you're explaining, giving more of yourself than you're taking, right? You're giving more of your time, more of your effort. And I'd say, all three of us in this conversation right now give way more than we ever take. And I'd say we're always in a deficit of some kind. And to relate this back to fitness, I think it's important that we sort of have periodization, and we have sort of quote unquote diet breaks where we get out of that deficit, even if it's just at maintenance, right? And that's typically like when you take a holiday, you take a week off, you take time for yourself. Maybe you take even a day off or an afternoon off can be that, whether that's a refeed or a diet break, man. Like obviously a refeed would be more of a 1 to 2 day, sort of like the weekend for most people, where they're giving back and pouring back into their bucket after they just spent all week basically like if they had a fire hose attached to their bucket, just fire hosing all the water out of their bucket, right? Like to the extent where they can't even keep up with what they're giving away. But some are garden hose, and some are just sort of a morphine drip out of their bucket, right? Everyone has a different level of give that they give to the world and those around them. And I think it's the ability to periodize it, because I don't think there's a right answer to how much to give and how much to have to take back. I think there's an individual variability to this, and you have to find it for yourself, and you have to learn how to better periodize your life, and you have to learn how to better periodize your efforts that you're giving to others or giving to the world. And as we know within the fitness space, right, like a proper plan, a proper program involves periodization, and involves diet breaks or periods of maintenance and training, or a period of low volume and training or something, right? And the same goes for your life. The same goes for your social capabilities and your emotional capacity as well. So I don't know if I even answered the question, but that's just kind of where my mind went.
I love how that went. Like, it was a smart way of looking at it, like that we can also plan that stuff. Like we can be aware that we're prone to emptying our bucket, but then plan like what's it going to look like when we fill that thing up? Like whether we have the finances or not, or whatever our geography or our restrictions looks like figure out what it looks like to fill your cup, even if it's just you're going to do a meditation themed month where you get super reflective and you don't give as many people your time as you would have during another period. Like there's so many approaches to it, and I thought that structuring it was a pretty pivotal way to see it. So Nick, it's your turn.
Yeah, so right now I primarily work as like a consultant with marketing and strategy and communications and all that stuff, but I think it was like March of 2018 when I was doing primarily nutrition coaching still. I had gotten up to 140 clients, and I was working with a company called Stronger You, and which I still help. And with them specifically, and I don't know how to word this without it coming across as a shop, but it's not meant to be, a lot of people, like many macro-based coaches do, they're all great, but it's just the byproduct of the game. They tend to treat people like numbers a lot, and that was something that always really sat poorly with me. Like I didn't like that. So I would always try to give more where those people gave less and things like that, just because I knew it would help the people. And also, like, I knew that if I was a client and I was dealing with these things outside of being a few grams off my carb number, I would want the coach to notice that and say something to actual, be a coach, I guess. And I got up to 140 clients, and it was just way too fucking much to me. And it's also weird because whenever you get to a certain threshold in terms of giving and you start to feel it, you've already far exceeded what your actual limit is. You know what I'm saying? Like there's this catch-up effect where if, maybe I could have handled 90 people, right, and been fine. I didn't feel it until I got to 140 people, and now I'm way the fuck too far, and that's how burnout happens and things like that. So after I started to kind of get there, like get to that point, and just feeling like way overtapped, I pulled way back, and I'm lucky that I can. Like I'm in a position where like I can take long periods of work off. So I did that and just pulled way back to kind of like as Austin said, like kind of take a period of periodization and pulling back and deloading and all that stuff. But what was weird is I think like in retrospect, I pulled too far back, and I think that's kind of like a binge purge cycle of this that a lot of people like us kind of find themselves on. One of the reasons that I think people like us three and many other people like are so prone to giving more than we take is because giving to some degree also fills up our cup, but there becomes a point of diminishing returns, right? So what I think happened is I pulled way back. I didn't necessarily feel better. And I think it's because I vacated the thing that also made me feel good. And I think people probably do the same with their fitness, where they go, 6-7 days a week, twice a day. They kill it for, 2 months or whatever, and they take a year off the gym. And that's not healthy, right? Whereas in reality, like I think trying to find that sweet spot to where you do push sometimes more, you do pull back sometimes more, but there's always a constant flow of some degree. And I think like that's a really, really important thing for people that find themselves in situations like all of us have, is being cognizant of how much you're giving, but not letting any kind of trauma that has come from that result in you not giving anything at all. Because giving is part of kind of who you are. You know what I'm saying? Like it's something you're drawn to. And if you take that away, like the whole system draws out. You know what I'm saying? So
yes.
I think it's the level of, I wanted to add just a comparison there. Is I think a great way to look at that from a physiological perspective, if people are trying to are maybe having a hard time connecting those dots, it's like dehydration in the way that if your mouth is dry, you're not in a critical state yet, but that's sort of the first line of defense of your body telling you to drink water. Mm-hmm. And from experience, if your mouth is dry and you don't have any water available, the onset of a migraine is coming very, very soon, or at least in the latter part of the day if you don't start to drink some water. Mm-hmm. And some other physiological effects, right? Like brain fog and trouble with memory. And there's downstream effects, obviously, electrolyte imbalances and muscle cramps and all of these things, right? That are downstream effects of the thing that you should have recognized earlier. And I think the ability to really recognize things when that first alert comes, right? It's sort of like, it's just that alert that's sort of, let's say a warning, like if your phone sits out in the heat, there's usually a warning on your screen that says phone is overheated, warning, please put your phone, take it out of, put it in the shade or something, right? There's a warning before the phone just doesn't explode. It gives you a warning, right? And,
right.
Before you explode, you need to sort of set up systems to have a warning, whether that's people around you. Like my wife's the first one to tell me like, hey, I think you're taking on too much. Yeah. And I hit that point. I've hit that point a lot of my life, but I've hit that point this year at different times. And I'm in a push period right now. And it's been really interesting, but having people around you as that alert is really important. And, whether that's a partner or a friend or a colleague or someone who is aware enough and cares enough about you to think about you in this way, or be concerned for you, typically they can see things kind of like Chris, what you were saying, like they see things in you that you don't see. And typically when others are focused on the positives that we put out, whereas we're mainly focused on those negative insecurities that we're sort of putting out into the world, right? So there's a different starting line for each of us, depending on if we're sort of introspecting or someone is being reflective upon us or toward us, right? So Chris, like you were saying, like telling a client, you could say, have the most inspiring speech to a client that's all true, right? And then they lift a weight. But I guarantee you a day later, you to some degree or at some point in your life, you've done this to someone else as a trainer. And then at some point, you've been in the same situation where you should have done this to yourself because all these things are true. But you probably didn't do that. You probably talked yourself out of it because you were looking at the insecurities rather than the positivities, or negatives other than the positives.
It's weird how we do that. How we need like someone to like point out this thing that we just don't see, even if we're aware that we do these type of things. Like, for example, I consult with this dude named Ben Johnson, and he is super prone personality wise. He's very much like a quote unquote like ideas guy, right? So a lot of my work with him is like literally just pulling back those ideas.
It's like me. I mean, shit, you working with me. It's like,
yeah. Well, I mean,
it's like, dude, you got 10 ideas. Let's go with one.
It's ironic that you were saying like that your wife, for example, like has to pull you back a lot, because from my experience with you, like you do a pretty good job, and maybe it's a learned type.
It's learned. It's learned.
Where you are very cognizant, seemingly, of projects you take on. Whereas Ben wants to do every project. The thing is, like, and this is nothing against him at all. Like, he's very creative and things like that. But a lot of ideas, people have so many ideas that they literally don't take any steps. And this is a totally different topic, but I think it's because having good ideas makes you feel like you did something. And in a way, you did. Having a good idea is the most valuable thing on the planet, right? Like a truly good idea, so long as it's followed up with action. And that's kind of the catch-22. Whereas a lot of people are hard fucking workers. Like, like I work with Robbie Farlow. He is maybe the hardest worker and this is not against anybody else, but he is maybe the hardest worker I know in the fitness industry. But he sometimes can like just run himself into the ground because of it, and that can lead to like discouragement and things like that. And it doesn't give him always the chance to take a step back and be creative. So I don't know why I got on. So it's weird how we sometimes just need someone to give us to work as like a North Star. You know what I'm saying? To keep us like pointed in the right direction, because even though we think we know where we're going, like we just kind of start to pull in one direction without noticing it until things get too far, your mouth gets dry, you want to blow your brains out every time you check your inbox or whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean that a lot of good topics have been covered, and I'm trying to like get a good summary for people to get their own reflective journeys. So just like the value of context is so helpful during this time. I mean, all years, any time in life, just more often than not, when there's conflict, there's like missing context. Like perhaps somebody doesn't understand, like, okay, like what was that really jacked person's first day like, or what is their personality like, or how we talked about like Austin, your experience with like how you can give a first impression and then how the mask can alter that, or just like how people can react to each of us in the gym versus how they might react to somebody else, or just all these different things where context helps, where making or planning is kind of like how we plan structure to allow us to not burn out. So we plan how we're going to fill our bucket. We almost need to also plan how we're going to add context to the different interactions that we have throughout the day, because while it might seem like a pain in the butt to interact more in person, or like to add in the hey, how are you doing to the people that we see out and about, like is going to help us move forward a lot better. And then reflecting on having like those people to support each other. Like I've definitely experienced just from being a podcast host and having people to bounce ideas off of, and to have very like this is about as real as it gets with me. Like if we were talking off the podcast, this would be how I talk. So it's like getting these opportunities to really lean on people and kind of bounce ideas back and forth, and get some fresh perspective and get some accountability, because like hopefully people that are listening to this are like, oh wow, I never thought about that. Maybe I should plan like a week where I enjoy my scenery around myself, or I change up my workspace. Maybe like a person could just take their desk out onto their balcony, and it would completely change their perception of where they are. Or they could, I hear so much success from people who have like a routine place that they go to. So I mean, Mike Dole is really good for this, in that he will set up in the coffee shop, and he's got like that skin on his laptop where it's like, hey, I'm Mike, if you're shy you can contact me here, kind of thing. And like I have a client that she goes to all the same shops when she's driving around. She has a business with about 10 locations, and because of these planned interactions, like hey, how are you, how's life, like because of that, it helps her business. And so whether it's for the fill our own bucket aspect of things, where we want to succeed as individuals and we want people to be on board with our campaign, or whether it's for feeling better about what space we're taking up, like feeling better about our space we take up in the gym, or feeling better about our space we take up with our internet connection. Just all these things, like context makes such a big difference. Context with mask use, context with political, social, everything. Context matters, and I think we've forgotten as we share our social media posts and quickly react to things and assume. We assume that when we see like a physique competitor, that they are rough around the edges, and we don't stop to realize that they might be an incredibly introspective, empathetic person.
Yeah, I think we're all egalitarian to our core, and again, like I use all there as a general statement. I think there's obviously outliers here, and I think to the core of us, though, from an evolutionary perspective, I think we're very egalitarian, especially to those within our own tribe or community. And we do have to work harder, I think, by nature, to be a little bit more egalitarian and empathetic and understanding of those outside of our tribe, right? And that just means outside of our immediate community, or our immediate, I guess our immediate communities in places that we frequent on each given day, or those, like our families, or our workspaces, or our colleagues, or the barista that makes your coffee every day. Like that's sort of your community. You're very comfortable around that. But as soon as you go outside of that, maybe you visit a different gym, maybe you go to a different coffee shop, maybe you, again, insert whatever you're looking for, or maybe you're just around a different type of person, different type of people who do different things or view the world in a different way. You have to go back to sort of, again, giving the benefit of the doubt and understanding that most of us, if given the opportunity, are egalitarian. And basically that's just kind of believing in the general principle that everyone is equal and deserves equal opportunity and equal rights. That's the definition of egalitarian, and or at least one of them, at least. So it's a matter of sort of understanding that foundational principle, and it goes back to understanding that holes in your system, holes in your foundation, right, during times of conflict, your awareness of them are heightened. I think that's, touching on what Nick was talking on earlier, and both of you really, about sort of the COVID crisis and it exposing things that were already broken to begin with, but it just sort of heightened our awareness to the fragility of those things or the holes in the foundation of our systems, right? Those holes weren't created because of this. Those holes were more or less heightened, or
they
sort of it was a spotlight, exactly. It was a spotlight over those holes in the foundation, right? And so now, clear as day, you can see the light coming out on the other side of like, holy shit, we have hundreds of holes. If you turn the spotlight off, you just see the structure and you're like, it's a pretty solid structure. We're pretty good. We're comfortable. Everyone seems to be happy. You turn the spotlight on again and you're like, dude, there are hundreds of holes in this foundation right now. And I don't even know where to start plugging. I don't know what is more load bearing than the other. And I don't know what's more important. And it seems seemingly no matter who you ask, they request or advise that you start plugging holes that the other said you should wait on. So I don't know what, obviously I'm in no way qualified to give any answers, but I think it starts by listening, and I think it starts by communicating and giving the benefit of the doubt and understanding that we're all to some degree egalitarian and do believe, whether you're acting out of insecurity and or sort of respective clout that you're trying to gain by your immediate tribe or group, we all really, I think, foundationally want the same things. And we want to give people the opportunities that they deserve, and we want to be equal in our abilities to give and receive positive actions, right? To treat thy neighbor as you would treat yourself, sort of golden rule. And I think it all goes back to that. And I think if we're able to tear down sort of the walls that we've created, whether it's these sort of daily microaggressions that we express ourselves with, even chipping away at things like that sort of tear down those walls of protectiveness that you think you're giving yourself towards the world and others around you. It's just, that's a good place to start, because as soon as you start to tear down those walls, a lot of people start to open up, even those around you who you never thought would.
To kind of piggyback off that, I had a post the other day on Instagram where I was just sharing like a bunch of thoughts, like bullet style. And one of them was something to the tune of like, a lot of times when you're telling someone that they're wrong, like you're actually just saying that you're right. And one of the reasons I kind of come to that thought was because like lately, it's funny you brought up like the Kroger thing, because I think you were being a little bit generous when you said only 10% of people aren't wearing them. Like here,
I know, but still.
it's pretty hot here. But but the thing is, I would go into these places and I would put on my mask, and I would see other people not wearing them, and I would get like legit like heated in my head for some reason, like to the point where I started thinking things like, bro, you were such a fucking bitch. You can't put on a mask for 10 minutes, and thinking these really toxic thoughts. You know what I'm saying? And I started to question like why, like why the fuck am I getting this heated over this? And it's weird because in these moments, it's really easy to justify why we're heated. Like when people are dying and we attach all this empathetic stuff. But if you care that much, why wouldn't I do something to help the problem? Whether it be like one of the people I saw was someone that I went to high school with, and I know him, and more than likely I could probably have a conversation that's done correctly to where maybe we could kind of bridge the gap. But then I don't actually care enough to do that. So why am I getting so heated? And I finally came to the conclusion like I'm just going to act the way that I think I should first, and then from there I'll try to like impact and stuff like that. And I think like, because it seems like the tone of like this whole conversation has been like being introspective and like retrospective and things like that, I think it's important to take a look at the things that are emotionally impacting you and asking why. And then when you come up with your first why, which is probably actually not why you're being emotionally impacted, I would then ask yourself if like that's a justification. like how mine was in terms of like oh, people were dying, blah blah blah. Like that wasn't actually the reason. I just got mad for no fucking, you know what I'm saying? I didn't care as much as I thought I cared. So I think it's really important to be introspective and ask yourself why and see where you're justifying things. And if something matters so much, like do more, go out and do things. You know what I'm saying? Because it's going to be a healthy outlet as opposed to just bubbling up inside. Or, and probably also more importantly, like I think people should start with themselves more. You know what I'm saying? I think one of the things that I hate turning things political, but I'm just going to do it. Like I am liberal, but I think one of the things that attracts people to social justice is, I think one of the things that attracts depressed people to social justice is it gives really empathetic people that see pain and kind of, you know, not appreciate, but can understand it. Like it makes them feel like they're doing something productive. And in reality, a lot of times, like it gives them, it's kind of like one of those productive procrastination things where it lets you kind of ignore your own shit. You know what I'm saying? I think a lot of depressed people choose outlets, not always, obviously, but I think a lot of depressed people choose outlets that help others but don't help themselves. And I think it's because helping yourself is really hard and really painful. I think we kind of run from that. And I think that's kind of a challenging thing. Some people don't want to hear, but I think that's a really important thing is like, if you're not happy, you need to help yourself first. Nowadays, apparently no one is fucking happy. So you need to take a look in the mirror and like see like and ask yourself why. And the thing is like once you start to kind of fix that, then you can actually help others. It's kind of like fix your own oxygen mask first or whatever. I think all of us are so caught up in telling others how they're wrong and how we're right and how they should fix themselves and stuff like that that we forget to clean our own room first, I guess. I think that is a big thing that I've been thinking about lately amongst like the real toxic environment that we've been living in lately with, which I think is also like this totally different. I think it's a byproduct of hyper connectivity. I think that's a big thing, the spotlight thing. I think things are not worse than they were. I think it's just people talk about the bad things more. You know what I'm saying? And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think like, because we're so connected, we just don't turn the spotlight back on ourselves. But
Well, that really got me thinking. I mean, I was so close to putting out this rant on my Instagram story last night and I held back, but this is like the perfect opportunity because then I can like provide the context that I wanted to provide. And it's just, I see so many people wanting change and I don't see all the time the actions that it takes. And this is calling myself out too. Like plenty of times it's like with the coffee, I ran out of coffee. Well, why didn't I stock up more on the coffee beans? Or like so many different examples for just an action that I could have taken. And no matter how many inconveniences that I can list off, like there's always a solution. And so I think it's a big pill to swallow for a lot of people, realizing like they're in their own way and realizing that like there's no direct pass to go collect your $200 kind of thing. Like you literally have to do something very difficult to get the desired outcome. Like no amount of posting about a fitness experience or posting about a nutrition experience is going to make the work any easier. Like when we achieve personal best in the gym, it's usually the product of quite a bit of programming and consistency and adherence. And that's tough because it takes sacrifice and it takes effort and it takes kind of testing ourselves beyond what our perceived limit is, like understanding that like that person that says that we can do it is right and it's us that told us that we couldn't do it. Like so often I'll work with a client and they're like, oh, I can't lift that. I'm like hell you can. Like if you can do that with one leg, I'm pretty sure you can do that other thing with two legs. Like it's so often because I do a lot of unilateral stuff with my clients. As soon as we get to just a normal squat and like they check all the boxes to be able to do a squat. And then because of the weight, it's intimidating. They're, well, I can't do that. I'm like, well, you totally can. Like if you're calm and collected and you can kind of see yourself doing it, you can totally pull it off. And it's just seeing people understand the effort that it's going to take to impact change, whether it be in their life short term, long term, whether it be in like one facet of their life, like their social life or their emotional health or their physical health, like just I guess like giving people that wake up call, like, hey, like you want more vacations? Set aside the money to take vacation, or understand your bandwidth to be able to have like the allotted time that it takes to take time off. Like black out your schedule for 2 days a week or whatever it takes, because like it kind of goes back to one of my Facebook posts that Nick went and liked this morning, which I really appreciated. It was just like any time that I've set myself up for the next challenge, I've never been 100% ready. Like I've quit a job cold turkey, being unemployed for like 2 weeks. I wasn't ready for the next thing, and I kind of figured it out. And I think a lot of us put ourselves in that position and we forget, like, when was the last time we were ready to make a positive change for ourselves? Like I reflected that it was like I felt maybe 80% ready, but never more than 80, probably like 60, 70. And it's just to understand that, yes, it's been a crazy year, but it's not much different than every other year. It is quite a bit on the social connectivity. Like imagining if this happened and Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all that stuff didn't exist, how we would perceive it differently. We probably wouldn't even be able to like bounce our ideas back and forth in the same way. And so I guess hopefully if somebody is listening to this whole episode through, that they realize like they're probably in their own way, and it's good time to get introspective and kind of realize, like, if you think you're taking up space, like it's okay to take up space. It's okay to give people context. It's okay to stop and make communication and find the ways to get through with the point and everything. Something that I've been doing with my episodes as of late, and to kind of keep us on track for time here, is I've been getting my guests to give a challenge to the audience. And so it's just like something that you want people to do. And so how you're going to do it is you're going to be like, your challenge for the day is, list off that challenge. I'm going to get each of you to do your own. So I'm going to start with you, Austin. What's the challenge for the day?
I think I'll build off of what I was probably going to echo from you both. And I'd say I would challenge you to audit the quality of noise you're putting into the world, because we're all putting noise out into the world, whether that's content or our ideas or our perceptions and or complaints of how things are done or how they're posed to us. And, you know, it could be audibly atrocious or it can be beautiful. And, you know, obviously we all, to some extent, love music. I love music. I listen to it all day, every day. It's constantly on as soon as I wake up to the time I go to bed. Like, it's just, if I'm cooking, if I'm eating, like, it's always playing. I love music, but obviously I choose to consume the most audibly tasteful music that, to me, like, I don't listen to white noise all day, right? Like, I don't listen to atrocious sound, and I don't consume atrocious content. You know, and I think, you know, I heard, I was listening to the Sam Harris and Tim Ferriss podcast yesterday, and they were more or less sort of echoing a similar point in that sort of we're all creating this noise, right? And we need to audit the quality of that noise that we're putting out into the world. And so if you're going to create noise, in which I think we all to some extent have the ability to create, we all have the ability to create noise, but there's a lot of time and effort that it takes to put in to create quality noise. And that just means creating good work, you know? And so if you're going to contribute, which we all most likely are, really audit what you're contributing to the world and sort of think of it in terms of how would this be perceived? And also, is this quality? Like, is this quality noise, or is this just junk? Is this just white noise in the background that's just adding to the collective of nonsense in the world. And I think there's a similar parallel to what Nick was kind of saying in terms of, social presence. It's like, you just feel like you're taking up space. Like you feel like you're just adding noise to the equation that just muffles everyone else, and there's a lot of that going around. And so there's a lot of great information out there, but it's muffled by a lot of the noise, and, negativity strikes louder than positivity does. And I think that reigns true. And so audit the quality of noise you're putting into the world, and hopefully it does start to improve. That's my challenge.
That's awesome. So Nick, what do you have for us?
To kind of piggyback off Austin. I used to say this thing about like on Facebook, because I got likes and shit, but that you can improve the quality of your life way fucking faster than like a president can. You know what I'm saying? And obviously he affects you and stuff like that, but you can improve your life faster than anyone else can, period. Even if your life is hard, you can do something most of the time, right? I think a lot of times people put a lot of noise out into the world to kind of run away from something else. I think it's, what we do. What I would challenge people to do today is to stop and think about the thing that right now you're actively avoiding. And more than likely, like there's probably something that immediately comes to mind, or a few things that do. Like, for example, I need to get Robbie Farlow some copywriting feedback, and I've been putting it off and shit like that, and that comes to mind. For some people, it might be going to the gym, or their diet, or getting back on plan. For Austin, it may be like writing the next chapter of his book or whatever. Like, there's probably something, like for you, Christian, like it might be going and getting coffee beans, like that way you don't hate your life tomorrow. I would challenge people to like think of the thing that's just hovering over top of them that they're avoiding and is stressing them out, and turning and just like facing that thing. Maybe it's paying an old bill, whatever it is, turning in your homework actually. That would be my challenge today. And I think it kind of goes like hand in hand with Austin's, like pay attention to what you're putting out in the world. At the same time, maybe take some of that time that you were spending just barking and apply to something that might actually help you.
I love it. So before we sign off today, I want to make sure that the audience knows how to find you guys. So drop some websites or whatever you got. We'll start with Austin.
I hang out a lot on Instagram typically. So just at Austin Current. You just search at Austin, you'll see a guy with a beard, and just click that one. I finally did change my profile picture after a couple of years, but it still includes a large beard, so that hasn't changed. So yeah, just add Austin Current. You can typically find everything that I do, and then physiquedevelopment.com is my main contribution, I think, for professionally. And yeah, look out for my book, April 2021, Science of Strength Training. It'll be published April of next year, but that's currently in the works and finishing up. So that's kind of my thing.
That's awesome. How about you, Nick?
You can find me on social media just by looking up my name, Nick Sorrell, Sorrell. Mostly active on Facebook and Instagram, and then I use Twitter as like this void to put all the thoughts that would get me fired from any job I might have in the future, You can also check out my website, nicksorrell.net, where I share some writing. And if you do decide to, check me out, reach out, say hi, be a human, and don't be like me with the woman who I wouldn't talk to in the Warmth area,
That's awesome. So thank you guys for joining me.
For sure, man. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, man. Thank you.